Giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachakorash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. News and prophecy, linking the things happening throughout the four corners of the earth, as well as here in Babylon the Great, which is America, and the Holy Scriptures. Linking these things to biblical prophecy, giving the elect of Yahweh Bashmiel Shai comfort and stability in these dark and confusing times, all right, as we are in Babylon the Great. The word Babylon goes back to Babel, which means confusion, all right, and confusion, con with fusion mixing, all right, and when you look at the stories, that are in the news, whether you're in alternative media, you're looking at brothers' videos, it's all over the place. Okay, it's so much happening, which ties to biblical prophecy, that we are blessed to have a medium to return to in the Holy Scriptures, all right, through Yahweh Shai's sacrifice. The understanding has been open, and we can tap into these things and comfort you brothers and sisters as we have been comforted, all right, because we are in perilous times, okay, and as the scriptures say in the book of Matthew, the 24th chapter and the 6th verse, these are the words of Yahweh Shai. It says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." You see that? So what we are reporting on, ties to wars and rumors of wars. All right. But things have not, escalated to the point where World War III has fully broken out yet. All right. But we report on the rumors as well, as it says in the book of Jeremiah 51. Okay. Even, with the build up to the MOTB, we may do a lesson on things that are being planned, as we are not ignorant of Satan's devices. They may bring out some legislation to where, in a roundabout way, we see where they're going. So we bring it out, we report on it. Okay. These are all tied to the rumors. This is the book of Jeremiah 51 and 45. "My people, go ye out of the midst of her, and deliver ye every man his soul from the fierce anger of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai." And that's done through repentance, not literally fleeing. Okay? It says, "Lest your heart faint, and ye fear for the rumor that shall be heard in the land." So a lot of people, when they're listening to these videos and they're watching, some of you are fearful because in the back of your head, you don't want this place to go down. In the back of your head, there's literally hope that America recovers and that the world eventually is given into the hand of, next time a Democrat that, not the world, but America is given into the hands of a Democrat that will mean well, and that the world will eventually, dwell in unity, and that there will be love, peace, and prosperity, as the elite bankers, still rule. You got guys like, Bill Gates, wiggling around. You got fake meat. So if your mind is not fully set on the kingdom of heaven and, detached from the hope of Babylon, then ultimately, as we bring out these rumors, you're worried, you're weary, you're faint. See that? And that's a lot of people who watch these videos, right? Some of you are, being entertained, but the beauty of it is that the Lord is not looking for the mass amounts of the people. The Lord is looking for his hopeful elect. He's looking for the elect, all right? And through the Holy Spirit, the elect is being gathered, all right? But, you look at certain comments And you could tell a lot of you aren't really believers. And a lot of you really have the hope. Let's go up earlier in this chapter and we'll go back down. All right, this is the book of Jeremiah 51:7. It says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that have made all the earth drunken, meaning the Lord has put this place in a position of authority and power in the earth. You so-called white people have not become the dominant race by, being the superior race and your high IQ and all of these things you've pushed in the world. The Lord has put you up high. The scriptures say that he would give the the kingdom unto the basest of men. So it's been given unto you to be on top. Okay? It says, Babylon had been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand that made all the earth drunken. Okay, there's no peace anywhere. Okay, everywhere you look, you see nothing but confusion. The scriptures say when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. You see nothing but mourning and hell all throughout the four corners of the earth. You got salmon exposed to cocaine, swimming fast as hell. Okay? Just complete madness all throughout the four corners of the earth, right? Nothing's happy. Nothing's stable. Everything's all over the place. See? The nations have drunken of her wine, which is her philosophy, her democracy. They're taking on this talking point of a technocracy, the MOTB infrastructure, right? Therefore, the nations are mad. They're driven out of their mind. See that? Everybody's bugged out. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her, take balm for her pain. If so be, she may be healed. That's what a lot of you are hoping. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her. Let us go everyone into his own country. And that's happening literally. There's a lot of people leaving this place. A lot of people who came over here, to tap into this American dream have come to the conclusion that it's a nightmare. Even certain of those Edomite South Africans who came over here to flee, quote unquote, oppression, those farmers and all of that propaganda that was being pushed when Trump first got in office. A lot of them are going back. Okay? For her judgment reacheth unto the heaven and is lifted up even unto the skies. So the Lord is getting ready to punish this place. But as you can see here, she is not healed. Babylon is not going to be healed. Okay? So what we are witnessing now are the birth pains associated with the fall of this place. Just like when a woman is giving birth, she'll have a birth pain and then it'll calm, right? Well, eventually another birth pain will come. Eventually another one will come. And eventually they will become uncontrollable, all right, until the son comes. And the son that's going to come is Yahweh Shai. You see that? And everything that we're witnessing, with this situation between Iran and Babylon, the small hats, okay, is it seems like an on and off thing. 1 week there's peace talks, ceasefire. The next week, the strait is open. The next 10 minutes is closed. It's all over the place. But just know that these devils are working wickedness. Okay, they may put a pause on the war to ante up on ammunition. All right, but eventually, as we continuously see this, more nations are going to get involved, and it's only going to escalate into Ezekiel the 38th chapter. But synonymously, the moves that are being made over in the East, Western Asia, right, what they call the Middle East, are going to bring hell to many regions of the earth. Okay, and many regions of the earth are already seeing the consequences, all right, and suffering the consequences of the moves that are being made, all right, by Babylon over there in the East, in this war and this going back and forth and the so-called closure of the strait. Here's an article I have here, and then we'll jump into a few videos. IEA chief warns we are facing the biggest energy security threat in history. Okay. And with the oil, you know, movement, being slowed. Okay. Now there are talks of energy crisis, energy lockdowns. And that's what we're going to tap into in this lesson now, real quick. All right. As you can see here, it says the world is currently navigating to the most significant energy security challenge in modern history. All right. And we'll tap into some of that. It says the crisis systems largely from the conflict involving Iran and the subsequent total closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Right. This maritime artery, which typically handles roughly 20 million barrels of petroleum daily, is currently paralyzed by a double blockade as both the U.S. and Iranian forces prevent any vessel movements through the passage. And this is the narrative that they're going to use as a means to say that there are shortages, right? And that we need to restrict human beings from doing things, okay? And it's going to lead to uproars of the people. It's going to lead to civil unrest, perplexity, and the collapse of economies, which is what we want. All right. But real quick before I get into, because I wanted to get into this video of the priest Ayashamath, Morning News and Prophecy. All right. War, politics, and prophecy, because, a lot of the things that are going on, it's like I get it and I can explain it, but I'm going to play his video so he can explain a lot of what's going on. I'll play a portion of his video that will also tap into helping forward the understanding of what I'm explaining here in this video. But here's a video here. This guy does pretty good work. Andre Jick, all right? The oil shock is about to hit America, all right? And we talked about the market manipulation. We talked about a lot of what's happening is that these, these elites and their underlings are fattening their pockets in preparation for the collapse. All right, because when it's all said and done, all right, they will have everything, and the people who were once the middle class will be, pretty much gone. All right, those who thought they had a little bit of money, they won't have anything, and pretty much everyone will have to bow to the solution of the NWO. This is what this is all leading to. Okay, but let's listen to a little bit of what he says here.
Okay, so we have to talk about oil and how it's about to affect the entire world, because I think we're being lied to.
Somebody shorted the oil market today by hundreds of millions of dollars exactly 20 minutes before Trump made his announcement that everything was going to be great. And if you see that once, it could be a coincidence. But that's happened at least 3 times, if not more, since the war began. That's a pattern.
The theory is that all of this back and forth about the strait is open, the strait is closed, well, then it's open, and now it's closed again, it's actually really easy to explain. It's a way for insiders to manipulate the stock markets. Because last Friday, we were told the Strait of Hormuz was finally open.
See, that's a way for them to manipulate the stock markets. You see what I'm saying? As the scriptures say, and synonymously, people are catching hell. Okay? Synonymously, people are suffering in particular regions of the earth from these moves that they're making. As we read the other day, or yesterday, I believe, the rich men are full of violence. Okay? They operate on a different vibration. They don't give a damn. They have no regard for human life. Horrible rulership. As we always read in the book of Sirach, we'll get that as well. Let's get Sirach, 10th chapter. Because when they put sanctions on people, when they manipulate the markets like this, they know the consequences of what they're doing, but they don't give a damn. Sirach, chapter 10 and 1. A wise judge will instruct his people, but the government of a prudent man is well ordered. And I'm just jump to the point. An unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. The power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord, and in due time he will set over it one that is profitable. Verse 8, because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit. Okay? The kingdom is translated from one people to another. And this is an aspect of riches gotten by deceit, market manipulation, man. Okay? This is the book of Micah 6 and 10. Are there yet the treasures of the wickedness in the house of the wicked, in the scant measure that is abominable? Okay? Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights? The rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue and their mouth is deceitful. Okay? Therefore I will make thee sick in smiting thee, in making thee desolate because of thy sin. So the Lord is getting, these devils have crimes that are above normal, crime. Their crime goes deep. Okay, so let's listen to it again.
Okay, so we have to talk about oil and how it's about to affect the entire world, because I think we're being lied to.
Somebody shorted the oil market today by hundreds of millions of dollars exactly 20 minutes before Trump made his announcement that everything was going to be great. And if you see that once, it could be a coincidence. But that's happened at least 3 times, if not more, since the war began. That's a pattern.
The theory is that all of this back and forth about the strait is open, the strait is closed, well, then it's open, and now it's closed again, it's actually really easy to explain. It's a way for insiders to manipulate the stock markets, because last Friday, we were told the Strait of Hormuz was finally open, which is a huge reason why the price of paper oil went way down and the markets rallied to a new all-time high, only to find out that over the weekend, that's not the case at all. And the strait is still very much closed, and maps are showing a lot of the ships were being routed back, and now no ships are allowed to pass. Now, there's also a lot of really weird things starting to happen as well. Like, for example, there seems to be a virus that's infecting the world's gas infrastructure. There are now dozens and dozens of energy pipelines that have caught fire or accidentally exploded. And this dates all the way back from March of this year, and it's happening all across the world. And because all of this flow of energy is not allowed to move freely, there are now warnings that the world is about to go through a really bad recession.
The International Monetary Fund is warning of a worldwide recession if the war in the Middle East doesn't end soon. If the conflict drags on, the IMF says energy and food prices will spike higher, stunting economic growth across the globe.
Now, hold on. Maybe everything will be fine for the U.S., right? Because we're told that the U.S. is a net exporter of oil. But the reality is that the United States actually imports more crude oil than it exports. And here's the math. We bring in about 6.3 million barrels a day and send out about 4.1 million. That makes us a net importer, aka consumer, of 2.2 million barrels a day. You can't be a net importer of something and also be the world's supplier of it. That math just doesn't make sense. And all of this confusion about how much we actually have or don't have is exactly why the price of oil is 2 completely different numbers depending on where you look. One of those numbers is the paper price. The other is the price oil actually costs in the real world if a country needs a barrel delivered to it today. And the gap between those 2 numbers is about $35, which is the biggest spread ever recorded in history.
When we talk about commodities, there is a huge difference between what you see on the screen and how much you pay to get that commodity. So you see the screen, $90 a barrel. Good luck if you get an oil barrel for $90.
Here's a chart from JP Morgan. It shows that spread going back to 2008. And for almost 20 years, those 2 prices, paper oil and physical oil, basically moved together. They were maybe $1 or 2 apart, maybe $5 in a crisis, but the gap right now is way outside of anything we've ever seen. And the last time something even close to this happened was during COVID, when oil went negative for a very short time, but that's what economists called a demand collapse, when nobody was buying anything because nobody was traveling. This is the opposite. This is a supply emergency. Now, unfortunately, peace talks and negotiations have failed, which means the war is technically not over. But the White House is taking a victory lap, and the stock market is coming back up. We're told everything is going to be fine, and the U.S. just became the world's gas station again. But the data is telling us something is going very wrong, and I think the worst of it probably hasn't hit us at the gas pump yet. The effects are starting to be felt in different parts of the world, but not in the U.S. yet. So in this video, I want to help explain exactly what I think is going on and when all of this actually starts to affect us at the gas pump and in the stock market. The effect of this war has sort of been set in motion, and we're looking around and we're seeing the mountains, and the market seems fine, and oil is not that much more expensive, but on the horizon, something is coming. What is that something, and when is it getting here? So there's a couple questions I'm trying to understand. Like, how bad is the oil shortage right now? Which parts of the world are going to feel it first? And what's happening in the global bond market? And how will this affect the investment markets, if at all? Because the stock market seems to be doing just fine. Okay, let's start with how much oil is now missing. So all of this, of course, goes back to the Strait of Hormuz, where a fifth of the whole world's oil and gas used to go through every single day. And remember, oil is not just gasoline. Oil is how food gets to grocery stores. It's how factories run. Yep. It's how planes fly and ships move and fertilizer gets produced, right? And plastics get made.
And remember, the scriptures talked about how Esau in Genesis, the 27th chapter, okay, Genesis 27 and 39, all right, the blessing that was given unto Esau, all right, which is a temporal blessing, and it's not a fully secured blessing, all right. It would have deficiencies because he's not the holy people. It says, Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above. And when you look up this word fatness, right, all right, is ma shaman, okay, oil, okay, richly prepared food, okay, fertile place, fat piece, all right. He would have control of the earth. He would have control ultimately of trade. You know, the EU, you know, gives him access to, you know, trade and access to minerals and different things that regular nations don't have access to, right? But again, his dwelling will be the fatness of the earth. And ultimately, as we continue to read how his blessing will play out, right, is that ultimately he would live by the sword. Okay, so he would have the fatness of the earth pretty much by the sword. And when they talk about these 7 countries that they deem to dominate, you know, to enter into the NWO, Iran is on that list. Now they're talking about Turkey's next. All right, this is a ploy to basically have control, all right, over all of the resources, over all of trade and how things flow, all right, on the Western Hemisphere and on the Eastern Hemisphere. Okay. But they've run into many problems as they're trying to do this. You see what I'm saying? But oil is very important. Okay, it's not just, you know, putting gas in the car. It's pretty much how everything gets from one place to another, how food gets into your grocery stores, right? Let's keep listening.
Oil is the plumbing system of the whole economy. And so the question is, how much oil is now missing and how much does the world need? Turns out the world uses about 100 million barrels of oil every single day. That's at full capacity. What's missing right now is somewhere between 8 to 13 million barrels of that per day. That doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot. For context, the United States uses about 20 million barrels a day. So we're talking about losing the equivalent of half of America's daily oil usage. This is every day for weeks now. Now, one energy fund manager I came across put a specific number on the total damage, which is that the world will have lost 780 million barrels over the course of this conflict. Now, for context, the whole U.S. SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, holds about 400 million barrels, but it was already half empty before the war started. So we're talking about losing twice the entire emergency reserves the United States spent decades saving up. Now, obviously, countries have prepared for stuff like this, but they still won't have enough to cover what was lost without paying those higher prices. For example, U.S. spare capacity is at about 1 million barrels a day. Venezuela, under 1 million. Canada, via Pacific routes.
So as you can see, the world runs on a system, all right? The world relies on a system of things flowing. And with this war happening, Okay. And with these, this is shut down is open and shut down is open, it's causing disruptions in that flow. Okay. Now we're going to see places in Asia affected, heavily more, right? First. All right. But it's going to eventually affect here in Babylon the Great as well. Okay. And this is what so-called experts are warning of. Okay. Even Europe is seeing the effects of these happenings. All right. Let's keep listening.
Under 1 million. And if you add every alternative together, you'll get about 2.8 million barrels per day from all the temporary emergency stockpiles. 2.8 million barrels against a whole of 8 to 13 million, which means reserves will eventually run out and there will be a shortage. So then, when is the world going to start feeling the effect of this missing oil? And according to the best research I was able to find, most likely sometime in mid to late April is when those global oil supplies run out. We are in mid-April right now. So the next question is, which countries are going to start to feel the effects of all of this first? Okay, so the effect of this whole blockade is already happening to the rest of the world right now. And the tsunami's coming, but it's affecting certain countries more than others. Asia, for example, got hit first and the hardest. Deliveries to Asia basically stopped on April 1st. And Asia sources roughly 80% of its oil from the Persian Gulf. What's getting through right now is only about 6% of pre-war volumes.
And what does the scripture say? All right, 2nd Esdras 16:1. Woe be unto thee, Babylon, all right, which the physical landmass of Babylon is Iraq. All right, that war is causing all kind of hell in that region, right? Babylon, America has caused all kind of friction and tension over in that area as well. All right, trying to get a foothold over there in the so-called Middle East and Asia. Woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria. Okay, and these are all places that are catching hell at the hands of Esau, Edom here in the West, the small hat, and basically this friction and tension with Iran right now. Gird up yourselves with sackcloth and hair, bewail your children and be sorry, for your destruction is at hand. A sword is sent among you, and who may turn it back? A fire is sent among you, and who may quench it? Plagues are sent unto you, and what is he that may be able to drive them away? Okay, because war is coming. All right, destruction is coming. All right, and that region is going to be hit heavily. All right, once the World War III breaks out. This is 2nd Esdras 15:46. It says, "And thou, Asia, that are partaker of the hope of Babylon," all right, Babylon the Great, "and art the glory of her person." Okay, so through Esau, Edom, by his sword and by his craft, and being able to, through prophecy, he's made deals with, certain countries in the East, all right, that have forwarded the hegemony of Esau, Edom. Okay, it says, "Woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thou daughters in whoredom." Okay, many of these Eastern cultures have forsaken, cultural norms and have allowed Esau, Edom to come in and do his thing, all right, through trade deals, all right, and many other things, man. That deal with the petrodollar, we already went into that, okay, in previous news and prophecies. Okay, but basically, as we read in the book of Jeremiah 51, the nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Okay, and now is a judgment coming to all of them, and they're getting ready to all pretty much end it with the brawl for it all. Okay, World War III. But they're all setting up the MOTB infrastructure as well. Okay, and pretty much they've taken in Western influence. They've taken in Edomite cultural norms, and pretty much all of them are heathen. All right, but those in the East, those heathen over in the East, they have some form of structure and cultural norms and standards that they've given up. Okay, through basically committing fornication with the whore. It says that they might please and glory in thy lovers. All right, for money. Okay, It says, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works and inventions. Therefore said the Lord. All right. And again, all of these, all right, Asian nations, these Eastern countries are tapping into the MOTB infrastructure, man. So plagues are coming unto them as well. I will send plagues unto thee. They're not innocent. Widowhood, famine, poverty, sword, and pestilence to waste thy houses with destruction and with death. Okay? And the glory of thy power shall be dried up as a flower. The heat shall arise that is sent over thee. So again, as Yahushua said in Matthew, the 24th chapter, these are all just the wars and rumors of wars. Okay? Basically, we're witnessing famines, pestilences, earthquakes, distress of the nations. These are all the beginning of sorrows. Okay, so what Esau Edom is doing over there, all right, with that friction with Iran is leading to a lot of prophecy being fulfilled, man. Okay, and the elites have their mind that they're ultimately, through all of this chaos, going to set up that new world order. Okay.
Now, the Philippines was also one of the first countries to declare their national emergency after their gas prices more than doubled almost overnight. Indonesia and Vietnam told people to work from home to conserve fuel. In Thailand, their fishing industry, which is about 1% of their whole economy, is shutting down because marine fuel costs went up by 250%. In Japan, bus and ferry services are slowing down because of fuel shortages. In India, the government stopped LPG supplies for commercial use to protect household cooking fuel. In Mumbai, roughly 20% of hotels and restaurants had already been shut down by early March. In Africa, last deliveries to Africa stopped on April 10th. Countries like Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, South Sudan, they're now literally diluting their petrol. They're mixing it with other chemicals to stretch what's left. And they're also restricting electricity. Australia's last fuel shipment is expected to arrive April 19th. They've already released their national reserves, they've cut fuel taxes, and they put together a national security plan. And then there's Europe. Their deliveries stopped around April 10th as well, which is why they're doing everything in their power to reduce demand.
How can we reduce the demand? Because, of course, the least expensive energy is the energy that is not used.
So that's not looking good. The dominoes are starting to fall. But what about the United States? JP Morgan says we're basically the last in line to be affected, with most deliveries expected to have stopped on April 15th. The final crude cargoes reached Texas on April 1st and California on April 8th, which means the buffer that's been protecting us from feeling this at the gas pump, that buffer's gone. So the question is, how many more weeks of this can we expect before oil prices react and we actually start to feel it? JP Morgan puts a specific date on when this will happen. The last tanker to clear Hormuz before the closure was February 28th. That ship is expected to reach its final destination around April 20th. That is the moment JP Morgan says pre-closure barrels are fully used up from the global supply chain, and after that, there's no more buffer. And what that means is the physical price and the paper price will have to converge. Now, hold on. If all of this is already happening, why is the paper price of oil still pretty low, especially after we learned that ceasefire talks failed? Oil prices should have gone up, right? But they went down. And the best theory that explains this suggests that someone placed huge bets that oil prices would fall around the ceasefire announcement. In fact, they're doing an investigation.
Market manipulation. Okay, let's just ask, what is market manipulation? What is market manipulation? And who does it? Market manipulation is the intentional, illegal act of creating artificial, false, or misleading appearances regarding the price or trading value of securities, stocks, cryptocurrencies, etc., in this case, oil, right? To deceive investors and gain profit. It interferes with free and fair market, often conducted by fraudulent traders, all right, hedge fund or individuals using scams like pump and dump and inflated prices. Okay? And really, it's the elites. Okay? They're never going to point the finger at their own elites. And of course, there's brothers who can explain this deeper. All right? But you get the drift. All right? Some type of funny business is going on. All right? Let's rewind that just a little bit. We'll play a little bit more of this and move on.
Failed. Oil prices should have gone up, right? but they went down. And the best theory that explains this suggests that someone placed huge bets that oil prices would fall around the ceasefire announcement. In fact, they're doing an investigation into it. Those are called short positions. Now remember, a short position in oil futures means that eventually, when that contract expires, you either close it out or you have to actually deliver physical oil. And the theory is that the ceasefire may have been partially engineered to give whoever placed those shorts one last window to exit their positions before the physical reality makes the paper price really impossible to hold. And Chris Martinson, who I cited earlier in this video, made a prediction about this. He said whoever it is that's dumping paper oil futures cannot actually deliver the oil when the time comes. And maybe they don't have any intention of delivering it.
Right now, the oil price is being heavily contained and capped by someone. Everybody knows that it's the United States government, somehow, either directly or through proxies, has been actively suppressing the price of oil, which they can only do for about another week here before it starts to really blow up on them, figuratively speaking.
What that means is someone is selling promises of oil at $100 a barrel, knowing they will never actually produce said oil. They're using the paper market as a psychological tool to calm the market down. But when those contracts come due, when the buyer says, okay, where's my oil? There will be a forced buying event. The entity that sold those contracts will have to buy them back at whatever the market price is at that moment. So if physical oil is at 130 or 140 or whatever it is, that's what they'll pay.
All right, we'll come back to this. Let's move here, right? This is GMS Kingdom Minded 144, Morning News and Prophecy, War, Politics, and Prophecy.
Okay, but the main event, the heavyweights, all right, that's in the ring is America and Iran. So for these last 2 weeks, there's been a ceasefire. Oh, let me cue this video up real quick. All right, so for the last few weeks, there's been a ceasefire, okay, and so-called talks and negotiations. Well, neither side is going to agree on anything, okay, because since February 28, what has happened, Iran has taken control of the Strait of Hormuz, okay? So the West and their media, they play this game of the Strait of Hormuz closed, it's open, it's closed, it's open, which it was never closed, all right? Iran has just taken control because there's still oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, but it's according to, all right, the IRGC, the Iranian government and military, okay? So you still have certain nations that's getting their oil, like China, Pakistan, so forth and so on. You know, nations that are leaving the dollar, which that's where you get into the level above the day-to-day, all right? The politics, the elites, they want the dollar to collapse, okay? So just to sum it up, all right, Iran having control of the Strait of Hormuz works in our favor because that still chokes out the oil supply that's going to the global market because everything is not getting through, all right? Those GCC nations, okay, most of their oil is not getting through, okay? And the elites can run with that narrative, okay, and push for an energy crisis lockdown, okay? So as long as, because it ain't going back to what it was before February 28th, you know, when the Strait of Hormuz was just an open sea lane to where these ships came and go. They didn't have to pay no toll. They just came and went. You know, energy just flowed freely through, okay? But now it's being choked out. That's not going to change.
Right, now it's being choked out. And these are, again, birth pains. This is the book of 2nd Esdras 16 and 37. All right, behold, the plagues draw nigh and are not slack. As when a woman with child in the 9th month bringeth forth her son, 2 or 3 hours of her birth pains compass her womb, which pains when the child cometh forth, they slack not a moment. So in between, you know, contractions, you know, there's time. You know, they may come 1 hour. You know, there's a point where they're coming every hour. Then there's a point where they come every, 45 minutes, then every 30 minutes, then every 10 minutes, then, and this is basically what we see happening. Okay. And it's not going to stop. All of these things are having economic consequences. All right. Even though they may seem to come and go. All right. They're leading the elites closer and closer to what they want. All right. Which is an economic collapse. So they can destroy your constitution and declare what? Martial law to bring in their new world order. And it's not going to work. Okay. Eventually things are going to spiral out of control. But the Lord prophetically is going to allow this devil to come down with great wrath and try to set this thing up. All right. Verse 39. Even so shall the plagues not the plagues be slack. Forgive me. I'm doing a detox, so my brain's a little cloudy. It says, even so shall not the plagues be slack to come upon the earth, and the world shall mourn, and sorrow shall come upon it on every side. And we're seeing those sorrows. See that? We're seeing those sorrows, man. Oh, my people, hear my word. Make you ready to the battle, and in those evils be even as pilgrims upon the earth. So we're going to be in the midst of these evils, man. And the Lord got us. It's going to be a bittersweet situation. Let's keep going.
Ain't no going back. All right, because they talking about the Straits open going back to before February 28th. There's never going back to that.
Nope.
Okay, Iran is not going to turn loose. Okay, the control of the Strait of Hormuz. They'll never do that. Okay, I'll be extremely surprised if they did. All right, but what we have now with the Strait of Hormuz, all right, in control, all right, by Iran. Well, you have this narrative of an energy crisis lockdown. Okay, so whether they get to fight, whether they're fighting or not, the Strait is still closed. So that narrative is still in play. Okay, of the energy crisis lockdown. All right. Now, as far as militarily, what both sides are doing, they're just gearing up for another round.
That's it.
Okay, this is gonna be round 3. You know, we talked about this, the 12-day war, that they just went to their corners. 7 months. 7 months and some change. They came back out fighting again. They locked up again. Okay. Next time they went 40, a little bit over 40 days. Okay. They got another ceasefire. All right, and both sides are arming up. So these deals are nothing. They're just using these deals, all right, to reposition themselves for this third round. That they're gonna lock up again, and it's gonna be more intense this time. Okay. The 12-day war was just between the small hats and Iran going back and forth with each other. Okay, then America came in at the end. All right, they created an off-ramp. They went to their corner. All right. This time, it was Iran going at the small hats and America and getting these other nations, these GCC nations in the region involved as well. So we were regional this time. Okay. So now, this ceasefire, everybody in their corners, and you got all these nations in the background position themselves to get involved too. Turkey is in it.
Yep, Turkey. Okay, they're talking about getting involved. And this is Ezekiel the 38th chapter. Okay?
Getting ready. Okay? To join up with Iran and Russia. Okay? Because these small hats are saying that Turkey is next. Okay? So that's activating what? Prophecy, Ezekiel 38. Okay? So when they come back together again, it's going to be more intense. All right. And don't be surprised if there's more nations that get directly involved.
Right. And I wanted to bring this out as well. The UAE warns U.S. it could ditch the petrodollar for the Chinese yuan. All right. The United Arab Emirates, which are basically catching hell at the hands of being partners with the United States, as this friction with Iran, forwards itself. Okay, many of these UAE, territories are catching hell, getting bombed because they're hosting America's military because of the deals that they've made for the petrodollar. Okay, but with all of the hell they're catching at the helm of being partners with America, all right, we've seen some back and forth between Trump and a lot of the UAE leaders, and they like, these niggas are madmen. But we see now that the UAE has cautioned the U.S. Treasury that it may be compelled to use the Chinese yuan, basically doing business with China, though their money is not as strong as the dollar. Okay, doing business with China is more, all right, it comes with less BS and madness. All right. So these moves going forward, all right, can only lead to war. Okay. Let's see here. Tehran has proposed a strategy, all right, and pressure aimed at raising costs for Washington and its allies. The UAE bore the brunt of the Iranian retaliation against U.S. military bases and other high-value locations, with over 2,800 drones and missiles reportedly fired at the country. All right, because remember, the deals they made with America allowed America to come build military bases there. All right, so Iran is bombing those military bases. The U.S. Treasury could offer a currency swap, though these types of arrangements are usually handled by the Federal Reserve. All right. So usually when you see monetary wars and all of this type of talk, a big time war is getting ready to come. Okay. The WSJ said Fed approval for the UAE is unlikely and cited a president last year. All right. A precedent last year in which a 20 billion support package was arranged by the Treasury for Argentina ahead of the key election. All right, you could, read more into that, but there's a lot happening, man. Okay, and we know prophetically that Esau, Edom, in the book of Obadiah, okay, is going to lose allies. So as things get closer and closer to World War III, okay, Babylon and the small hat is going to look up, and all of their allies are going to be what? Have missiles turned at them. All right, that's another thing coming from all of this when it's all said and done. This is the book of Obadiah. All right, verse 7, it says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee, all right, and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee, and there is no understanding in him. All right, so there's this move to have Esau, Edom, push towards Iran is prophetic, and it's leading to everything we need, okay, to move forward and eventually get the hell up out of here, man.
Okay? So this is going to, the war is going to continue to escalate. Okay? That's all it can do. Ain't no going backwards. Okay? How things were before February 28th, that's gone. It can never go back to that. Okay? Because we have to understand, it was so much damage done, okay, in that region. All right? What Iran was able to do in that short amount of time, they destroyed decades of military buildup. So a 2-week or month break ain't gonna bring back decades of what was destroyed in 40 days. Okay, so it ain't never going back to before February 28th. The only thing they can do now is escalate, and it's the Most High that got them on this escalation level. Okay, but this ceasefire, all right, as long as the Strait of Hormuz is in the control of Iran, then they can run with the narrative of an energy crisis lockdown. Okay, which that works in our favor. So everything is working exactly how it needs to be. So let's play this real quick, all right, just to show you that they're building up for round 3. Okay.
Right, because that's another aspect of what's happening. So you got market manipulation, and you have, during these so-called pauses, each side anteing up, all right, as they're studying each other strategically, all right, anteing up and getting more weaponry. And that's, in long term, that doesn't work in the favor of Babylon the Great. But I asked here, if the UAE ditched the petrodollar for the Chinese yuan, how would it affect America? If a country like the United Arab Emirates seriously shifted away from the U.S. dollar and oil trade and towards China currency, it wouldn't crash the U.S. overnight, but it would chip away at one of America's biggest hidden advantages, dollar dominance. And this is how he has ultimately enjoyed the fatness of the earth, all right, through dollar dominance. And dollar dominance is tied to petro, all right, which is tied to the deals he made with these Arab nations. Okay, all of that is being what? Broken up. Okay. And would reduce the demand for the dollar, which we're already seeing that. Okay. Pressure on the U.S. economy, higher interest rates in the U.S. And see, America has, benefited from reserve currency privilege, but through what we see happening, or what was happening with was that Venezuela, all right, when they were trading their oil outside of the dollar. Okay, nations are looking at what's happening in the current markets, and they're like, wait a minute, even Russia was able to still keep keep themselves afloat with all of the sanctions put on them by the United States. So nations are in their mind, it's time to start operating outside of the dollar. It's called, tapping into the dollar. We've enjoyed, but it's causing too much friction. It comes with too much because the dollar has been weaponized. It would strengthen China's global influence. okay, which we know that's tied to Russia as well. Sanctions become less effective. All right. Right now, the U.S. can use the dollar as a weapon. Cutting countries off from dollar transactions is a powerful sanction tool. If more trade happens outside of the dollar, countries can bypass U.S. sanctions more easily. U.S. geopolitical influence weakens. All right. It wouldn't happen overnight, yada, yada, yada. So it would just basically lead to less global reliance on the dollar, reduce U.S. economic leverage, all right, and more multi-polar financial world led by the U.S. and China. And basically it's going to lead to war, okay?
Okay, so let's play this.
Yeah, especially when those manifesting problems start occurring here and shelves are empty, prices for what's there is more than they can afford. Obviously, gasoline will be going up through the roof. That's when I think you're going to start seeing some of that stuff. But let me ask you just kind of on the near term here. I showed you this chart earlier to show that we have more naval power in the region than we had even at the start of the war. There's more air power. We've been restocking missiles. And let's take a look at this is what happened during the first 40 days. You see these are the attacks by U.S. and Israel against Iran. And so there was a considerable amount, caused lots of damage, at least anything above ground. And then you look at what the Iranians were able to do in response. And so it's obviously at a much lower rate, but it was sustained all the way through it in large part because.
And if a brother could post it, I think that's Psalm 55:21, how war was in his heart. You know?
Because they're not going to stop this war. So watch this video and you can get, more understanding on that. Very good video. I'm going to move along here to, let's go here. Give me 1 second here.
Do. When the buyer said,
let's go here.
One military strike, one critical choke point. 7 countries go dark. Not recession, not slowdown. Total collapse. Because while most nations can survive an energy shock, there's a group.
Started over. This is called Countries That Can't Survive Without the Strait of Hormuz.
One military strike, one critical choke point. 7 countries go dark. Not recession, not slowdown. Total collapse. Because while most nations can survive an energy shock, there's a group that literally cannot function if the Strait of Hormuz closes for even 60 days. Their entire existence, government budgets, electricity grids, food systems, runs on oil and gas that must pass through a 21-mile-wide channel between Iran and Oman. Right now, in April 2026, that channel is more fragile than it's been in decades. Tensions are escalating, insurance premiums are climbing, and the world's most critical energy artery is operating on borrowed time. Nearly 21 million barrels of oil flow through Hormuz every single day. That's 1/5 of global oil consumption squeezing through a strait so narrow that ships travel in lanes just 2 miles wide. But here's what nobody talks about. When Hormuz closes, some countries don't just take a hit. They cease to exist as functioning states. And the countdown has already started. Iraq, the 90-day death clock. Iraq exports 3.3 million barrels of oil per day. Oil funds 90% of the government, and 100% of those exports flow through Hormuz. Here's the timeline that Iraqi officials won't say out loud. Day 1, Hormuz closes. Revenue stops immediately. Day 30, government can't pay salaries. Protests start in Baghdad. Day 60, electricity becomes sporadic. Food imports collapse. Day 90, the state is functionally insolvent. Iraq has a small pipeline to Turkey, 450,000 barrels per day. That's 14% of what they need, which means Iraq doesn't have a backup plan. It has a 90-day countdown to state failure, but at least Iraq knows it's vulnerable. The next country built an entire economy pretending it's not. Qatar. The machine that can't stop Qatar supplies 25% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Over 95% flows through Hormuz. But here's what makes Qatar different from every oil producer. LNG facilities cannot be turned off and on like a faucet. They run 24/7. The cooling systems, the compression, the liquefaction process, it's all continuous. If Hormuz closes, Qatar has exactly 30 days of storage. After that, they face a choice. Keep producing with nowhere to send it, or shut down entirely. Shutting down an LNG facility doesn't mean flipping a switch. It means dismantling production, purging systems, and mothballing infrastructure. Restarting takes 6 to 12 months and costs billions, which means if Hormuz closes for even 2 months, Qatar doesn't just lose revenue, they lose their entire industrial base. And they're making that bet every single day. But that's a slow-motion collapse. The next country doesn't get months. Kuwait, 0 hour. Kuwait produces 2.4 million barrels per day.
So basically, this is going to lead to economic strain. And that taps into what we read earlier. Woe unto the 2nd Esdras 16:1. Woe unto the Babylon. All right, the physical landmass of Babylon is Iraq. Spiritual Babylon is America, Babylon the Great, and Asia. Okay, and that's this whole region we're reading about. Okay, what they've called the Middle East is really, all right, a region in Asia. Okay, woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria, and these are all countries that are catching hell. Okay, and again, all right, the book of Joel, right? Let's get Joel 3. This is all being done, all right, as a payback of what has been done to the Lord's chosen people. As a matter of fact, I believe it says that in this chapter, chosen, boom. It may be in the previous chapter. Done to my chosen, boom. Let's see here. Let's see here. Two. Chosen. Forget where it's at. Give me 1 second. Oh my goodness, here it is. 2nd Esdras 15. All right. And 55. The reward of thy whoredom shall be in thy bosom. Therefore shalt thou receive recompense. Like thou hast done unto my chosen, saith the Lord, even so shall the Most High do unto thee, and shall deliver thee into mischief. Thy children shall die of hunger, and thou shalt fall through the sword. Thy city shall be broken down, all right, and all thine shall perish with the sword in the field. So this economic strain is going to lead to what? People dying of hunger, economic collapse. All right, let's get the book of 2nd Esdras 9 in the GNT. All right, 2nd Esdras chapter 9. All right, and 1. He answered, consider all these things very carefully. When you see that some of the signs I have told you about have appeared, you will know that the time has come when the Most High will bring judgment upon the world he created. There will be earthquakes and national rebellions. There was just a major earthquake somewhere, I forget. International intrigues, unstable leaders, and confused rulers. Okay, when you see these things happening, you will know that they are what the Most High spoke about, all right, since the beginning through his prophets. The beginning and the end of everything that happens in the world are clear. The same is true in the world above. Wonders and miracles show the beginning of events, and mighty signs show how they end. Okay? And some people will escape destruction and be saved by their good works and by their faith. All of them, all right, will survive the dangers I have prescribed and will enjoy the salvation provided in the land that I have set apart from eternity as my own. Then those who have ignored my ways and held them in contempt will be surprised when they find themselves in continual torment. This will include those who ignored me while they were alive, even though they accepted the blessings I gave them, right? It will include all those who scorn my law during the time they were free to do so, all right? Grace. So it's all right. Woo. It says, it will include those who scorn my law during the time they were free to do so, and who refused to repent when they still had a chance. The torment they will suffer after death will force them to recognize the truth, that the scriptures say they shall know it by death, by pain. Okay? So these people are going to catch hell, and they're going to know they were wrong and forsaken the Lord. And see, all of these things we're seeing these are Eastern countries, right? You know, it's going into how basically what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz is going to affect Eastern countries. Listen to a little bit more.
100% exits through Hormuz. No pipeline to the Red Sea. No alternate route. No backup infrastructure. But here's the part that makes Kuwait different. Kuwait is small, just 4 million people, almost no economic diversification. When Hormuz closes, Kuwait doesn't have time to adapt. The government has reserves, massive ones, one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds. But money in a bank account doesn't replace the fundamental problem. Kuwait cannot sell its only product. Think about what that means in practice. Month 1, Government burns through cash reserves paying salaries. Month 3, imports slow, shortages begin. Month 6, the country is operating entirely on savings with no income. At some point, the math stops working. And unlike Iraq, which could fragment into regions, or Qatar, which could pivot to something else, Kuwait is a city-state built entirely on oil exports. If Hormuz closes permanently, Kuwait as a nation-state has no reason to exist. But these are all small players. The real shock is what happens to the giants. Saudi Arabia. The $500 million daily bleed, Saudi Arabia is the world's largest oil exporter. Over 9 million barrels per day. And here's what every analyst gets wrong. Yes, Saudi Arabia built the East-West pipeline. It can move 5 million barrels per day to the Red Sea, completely bypassing Hormuz. Brilliant planning, right? Except Saudi Arabia produces 9 million barrels per day. That pipeline handles just over half. The other 4 million barrels still flow through Hormuz. If the strait closes, Saudi Arabia loses $400 to $500 million per day, every single day. Now do the math on Vision 2030, NEOM, the megacities, the economic transformation, the social programs keeping the country stable, all funded by oil revenue. Saudi Arabia has financial reserves to survive a temporary closure, but temporary is doing all the work in that sentence.
So basically, these nations are living on borrowed time. Okay?
The UAE, the illusion of safety. The UAE looks like the smart one. They built the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, 1.5 million barrels per day to Fujairah, completely bypassing Hormuz. Future-proofed, right? Except the UAE produces 3 million barrels per day. That pipeline handles half. The other half still depends on Hormuz. But the real damage isn't even the oil. Dubai has positioned itself as the Middle East's trade hub. Abu Dhabi is a global financial center. If Hormuz becomes unsafe, shipping companies reroute. Insurance costs spike. Container volumes
through. Okay?
Quality check. 7 countries, trillions in GDP, hundreds of millions of people, all betting their survival on a 21-mile wide channel staying open. Not stable, not peaceful. Open. And here's the part that should terrify you. There is no backup plan that works. Pipelines take a decade to build and cost tens of billions. And even when they're done, they can only handle maybe 40% of what Hormuz moves, which means...
All right, so if this continues, which it will, these are things that, which are really, they're already happening. All right, even Europe, let's play this one real quick.
Europe is set to begin energy lockdowns in the next few weeks. A few weeks ago, Russia actually predicted this. They said that Europe was about to impose these restrictions, and now here we are. According to multiple reports, here you go, Financial Times, Brussels pushes remote working to ease energy crisis. Sounds fun, and they put a cat in the photo. Like, you'll be home with your cats. No big deal. She's got a big fluffy cat.
She is there.
She's so happy to be with her cat.
Does she have a warm beverage, too?
She's got a nice little plant and a
cat. I want to work there, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to work there, too.
Now all you need is like a puppy or like a nice warm bed. So the EU is pushing remote work now to tackle energy crisis. Brussels wants to start by introducing 1 mandatory workday from home per week as these energy prices continue and keep rising. Ursula von der Leyen just a few days ago already was laying the groundwork for this.
And it's only gonna continue and continue, or you're gonna be told to stay your ass at home, and you can only travel so far outside of where you live. Okay?
Listen.
Is how can we reduce the demand? Because of course the least expensive energy is the energy that is not used. We should reduce demand while...
Yeah, we should reduce demand. Of course, Jim Ferguson joins us now from the UK. He has been watching this very, very closely. Jim, of course, is the founder of Freedom Train International and one of the keenest observers of this globalist tyranny that's unfolding. Jim, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot, Clayton. It's always good to be on with you and Natalie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure. Well, you might, next time we see you, have to be working from home. So we wouldn't have a chance to have you in a studio because of these new laws. But, you know, I think any idiot could have looked at this and seen that this was going to come from the EU, from Europe, that these energy restrictions were going to start flowing. And here we are. What do you think, just broadly at a big picture level, of what this is going to mean for the people of Europe?
Well, from a strategic viewpoint, the pressures on the supplies are quite critical. We've been hearing about jet fuel running out in Europe in the next 6 weeks, and that was reported a week or so ago. I wrote an article about 3 weeks ago on the potential for energy lockdowns. I think really, if you want to take it from a strategic viewpoint, it's this. When governments start trying to manage demand, it tells you everything, because it basically means if they're managing demand, it's because they're unsure about managing the supply. And that's going to affect things on a massive scale, not just in Europe. It's already impacting truckers and farmers in Australia, with food prices due to rise probably within the next 3 weeks by about 20 to 30%. Hard-pressed families are already feeling the struggle already. So when that happens, because farmers use so much diesel to get the crops to market, to harvest them, and then the trucks have to supply them, that is going to put critical pressure on those supply chains. And there are warnings now that there could be food shortages as well. Indeed, I went into the local supermarket there just a couple of days ago, and I started to see shelves that were starting to empty. Now, one thing people don't always realize is that the tins of beans and soups and other things that are canned products are usually from last year's harvest, which means it takes that length of time to get them out and developed and produced and into market and into the shops. What could happen is it will most likely put up food prices dramatically, but it could cause real shortages. But the following year is when we might see it really escalating if they don't sort out this mess in the Straits of Hormuz and free up that international global shipping routes. The pressure's on. But from a globalist point of view, they're loving it because it gives them greater control. They will most likely start to introduce fear. Now, nothing at the moment is legal.
Again, this is what the elites want. Okay? They want to be able to ration energy and tell you to stay home and, you know, eventually, you know, and they know what this is going to bring about is crime. This is going to bring about, because people are going to lack bread. Let's get that in Second Esdras. As a matter of fact, let's get it in the GNT, Second Esdras 15. All right, Second Esdras, the 15th chapter, in the 14th verse. The world and the people in it are doomed. The war that will bring their destruction is very near. Nations will arm themselves to fight against other nations. We clearly see that. There will be great political turmoil because they're ultimately getting ready to set up a technocracy. People are finding out that their governments aren't working on their behalf, but they're working on behalf of the elites. With one group trying to underpower another and gain control, while ignoring the legitimate government. People are going to say, we have to take back over our governments. This is not working. We have nothing. You know, now there's an energy shortage. It's like, goddamn. Okay. There will be no longer free access to the city. See, you're not going to be able to travel like once before and wiggle around. And imagine that being implemented here in America, because of the struggle for power will bring destruction, terror, and total confusion wherever people live. Driven by famine and terrible suffering, people will assault their neighbors and mercilessly plunder their possessions. See, and this plays into the hands of the elites who plan on bringing order out of chaos. All right. And again, this is all happening, as I was going to get in the book of Joel. Okay, this is all happening as a plan on how the Lord is going to free his people. Okay, we just have to trust the Lord's process. Okay, and through these plagues, we have to be as pilgrims, understanding that this world is not our home and that this is the will of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Okay, it's going to be take great faith. All right, again, it's going to be bittersweet as we go through this, right? But through the bitter, the Lord is going to works for us beyond what we can imagine was coming. We got a lot to look forward to, and the only way for these spiritual happenings and the healings and the spiritual power that we talk about to come is through, all right, these plagues, through persecution. See that? So you can't have one without the other. Jeremiah 30:7 says, alas, for ultimately Jacob's trouble, because Esau's going to blame you for his system collapsing. Okay? We're already in a form of Jacob's trouble. Right? And it's only going to heighten. Okay? Because when Esau Edom has no one else to point the finger at, he's coming after Jacob. Okay? You know? But the Lord is going to protect his elect through all of it. That's what it says in the book of Second Esdras 16. Right? Then shall it be known who are my chosen. Okay? While all of this is happening, the scriptures clearly say, then shall be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as gold in the fire. So this is our final purging process. The hour of temptation that's going to be brought up on the world as a solution to the hell that they're creating.
Well, it's not mandatory yet, but we saw what happened during the COVID era.
Right.
It started off with that that easy sell, safe and effective. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we don't see that happening, where there will be increased taxes, fines for people that go out in their cars. If they want to go to the seaside right from around the country, your neighbours are going to be picking up the phone and reporting you for it. That's just where it's going. And it's very, very deeply concerning.
Right. If you read this Financial Times article, it says these are recommendations. They're just incentivizing you to make your employees stay home once a week or, use renewables and things. It's just an incentive for now. But those of us who did live in Europe during the pandemic, remember, here's a crazy story. We were in the little town of Bruges, we were at a Christmas lights walk. In Belgium, where you walk around the town and see the Christmas lights. And every half mile or so, we had to show our QR code that showed that we had a recent negative COVID test. And if we didn't, you cannot walk outside on this path to look at Christmas lights.
In the cold.
At night.
Draconian measures, okay? How much more as they're getting ready to bring about the MOTB and everything else?
Outside, in the cold, we couldn't do it. You had...
But the other important thing to remember is UN Agenda 2030.
Right.
Now, that is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which on the surface appear very noble, but there's nothing noble about them. This is, once again, hardcore control tactics. The globalists are obsessed with controlling everybody else. And the year 2030 is not that far away. It is accelerating towards it. And I think we're going to see more of these types of scenarios where people are being controlled through the use of energy, through the use of fuel, and ultimately through the use of food. If you don't get your digital ID, you can't get into the supermarket. We see the credit score system in China that is now causing many people in China to be locked out of their own homes because they've said something, they've jaywalked, they've done something that the state doesn't like. And the globalists in Europe, in particular in the EU Commission, love the Chinese model because they want the same thing here in Europe.
Jeez, you're absolutely right about that. They are rolling out Agenda 2030 right now.
And then you think about the high taxes that Europeans pay, thinking, well, we get free healthcare. Well, no, actually, because what you're paying for will be a more expensive government that works less, because they're going to mean that your healthcare workers work from home too. They're going to mean that your social security office works from home. You're going to continue to pay these high taxes. You're going to get less and less and less for it. So middle finger, Europeans, as always. This is not an indictment of the European people. It is absolute sympathy for the government that imposes on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the European nations are great people. I know a lot.
So we see how these things are affecting Asia, because Europe is a part of Asia too. Let's not forget that. Remember, it was called Euro-Asia. All right. So eventually, as the scriptures say, all right, the wealthy nation without care. Let's get that. Jeremiah 49. And 31, yep. And it's going to eventually hit you Americans, man. It's going to be deeper than a gas pump. All right? The petrodollar and the dollar dominance has allowed America to pretty much sit on a high horse away from certain plagues. All right? But these plagues are getting ready to hit America too. Okay? Because they have to do away with your Constitution. They have to have a reason, all right, to declare this technocracy and do away with government as you know it. And it's going to come through catastrophic events, which are manufactured. Jeremiah 49 and 31, arise, get you up to the wealthy nation that dwelleth without care, saith the Lord, which have neither gates nor bars, which dwelleth alone. And that's Babylon the Great and prophecy. Now, let's get a few more, and we're going to close this out. Professor Jang, which, for a while I got tired of him, but which he may be an insider, all right, but listen to what he says here.
What's your prediction for 2027? I think this war between the United States and Iran will only escalate. There can be no off-ramp. You'll see a ground invasion of Iran, in which case America's going to be stuck there 4 years, I think, is optimistic, possibly 10, 20 years. By 20...
So imagine the consequences of, which we know we ain't got no other 10 to 20 years here, but imagine the consequences, how much death. Listen to what he said. And that sign right there, I don't know. I know on the temple is Masonic, but people don't just pop up and blow up out of nowhere and dominate the algorithm out of nowhere. All right. But again, their own tongue falls on themselves either way. Either way, it works on our behalf. And when he goes off, we know when he goes off. But this man is now a prophet in the YouTube world. Okay. People are bringing him on their show and they're saying basically, they're listening to his predictions and preparing, all right, when the prophets have been saying all of this shit, all right, for years, man. But anyway,
What's your prediction for 2027? I think this war between the United States and Iran will only escalate. There can be no off-ramp. You'll see a ground invasion of Iran, in which case America's going to be stuck there 4 years, I think, is optimistic, possibly 10, 20 years. By 2027, you should have the framework for national draft already in place. ICE will be much more powerful than people imagine. They want to deploy National Guard to all major cities in America because they're preparing for economic collapse. All the ingredients for...
They're preparing for economic collapse. ICE is going to be more powerful. Then they're going to deploy those robots.
Collapse, all the ingredients for civil war should already be in place. Nationwide discontent and riots and protests and insurgencies. The global economy should have collapsed by 2027, so buckle up. It's worked out in China. If you come to China, I'll show you around. We have AI surveillance. We have AI digital currency and digital ID, and it's worked out well in China. But the Chinese people are a different breed. The American people love freedom. They love liberty.
Right. See, they got that pretty much, those draconian measures already, in place there in China. All right, but those gooks, they're through. They're born slaves. All of these people are born slaves, but at the end of the day, there's a particular mindset over here in America that when they start talking about, surveillance and tracking on a whole nother level and, rationings and shutdowns, these people over here are going to eventually rebel. And that's what these elites are waiting for. They were waiting on you American people to rebel. The Epstein list didn't really work. People were just typing and doing videos, pointing at articles and, close as hell to the screen, all manner of, you got people disappearing, particular truthers and people who have access to certain information just disappearing by the tons. Okay.
And disappearances of 10 U.S. scientists, including 4 from L.A., all tied to sensitive research. Now, among them, Caltech astrophysicist Carl Grillmeyer was fatally shot at his home in February. A suspect has been charged with his murder. While no connections between the cases have been confirmed, officials are treating the incidents as a potential national security concern. NASA and Caltech are cooperating with authorities as the investigations continue. Up next.
So you got all kind of, there was this one popular guy that just died. Yeah, David Wilcock, which he brought out some good information over the years. All right. Now he's gone. All right. And they call it a suicide. So, they're not hiding their wickedness. I mean, we can clearly see what's happening. All right. As they're getting ready to try to start, disappearing people who speak particular truths. All right. It's going to start with, those of their own, those who have made deals with them, those who are on the inside. Will coming out with truths, but eventually they're going to come after, all right, those like us, okay? And they are daring you U.S. citizens to form coups and rebel, all right, which according to your Constitution, you're supposed to have that right. But see, they've pretty much done away with your constitutional rights. And now anyone who speaks against the powers that be, all right, are getting ready to be attacked. As we read in the book of Isaiah, the 59th chapter, those who depart from evil make themselves a prey. Okay. And we've been bringing out the truth of the chariots, all right, and the angels for years. Okay. When these people come out with it, it's just like some great information. Right. But he just did an interview where he said he was all right. I'm not suicidal. About 2 days ago, then 48 hours later, he's gone. Okay?
Every day that I have on earth is a gift and a blessing, and I'm very grateful for that. Because, frankly, people are disappearing. Scientists are going missing. Now they're saying they're going to investigate this. The president himself is saying they're going to look into this and see if anything's going on. It's a little bit scary. I got to say, it's a little bit scary. But you guys knew that I might still show up, even though it was last minute and I've had a really rough week. That's kind of like every week. But
And shit, that can be AI. He could have already been gone. Who knows what the hell is going on? Either way it goes, everything is pointing towards corruption, wickedness. Okay? I mean, especially from 2020 going forward. I mean, it's always been corrupt, but from 2020 going forward, if you can't see who the devil is, then you got some soul searching to do. And even their own citizens are starting to figure it out. So they're getting ready to come down with great wrath. So in this video, which is a whole interview with him and Jimmy Dore, is pretty good. He's talking about the coming energy lockdowns will be worse than Ovid. And that's coming to the Americas. And people are figuring it out. All these wars are depopulation agenda. All right. If people do not resist now, they never will. The African presidents that opposed the Ovid jabs were murdered. Do not submit to digital IDs. All right. Which these could be bots, but people are figuring things out. So there's going to be a rebellion very soon.
Liberty, and I think that the Americans would rather fight than surrender their liberty.
Do you put any credence? So there's a lot of theories out there that COVID was a depopulation agenda because the international bankers and the WEF types, they realized that they can't sustain the aging populations, and so they did this vax, which has it's completely toxic, and it has negative efficacy, and they had to rig all the numbers in the systems. Like, for instance, they didn't.
See, Jimmy Dore, he's trying to figure things out. Okay, and he looks to be an Edomite, but he says he's Irish. Who knows? He could be a Jake. All right, but when you listen to his show, you could tell that he's trying to figure things out. Because a lot of these people thought America was the end all be all of their dream, and now they're seeing it collapse, and that their only elites are screwing them. So they're bringing people like him on. A lot of them are watching our videos. They're trying to figure things out, and the only conclusion that they can come to is that their elites are wicked as hell, and they pose a bigger threat than some nigga in, Harlem with a pistol shooting each other. Okay? Your own elites are at the forefront of the downfall of this U.S. economy and worldwide economies falling.
If you died within 14 days of getting your vax, they considered you unvaccinated, even though there could be a correlation between you dying from the vax. So they had to do all that. So do you put any credence into that theory that there is this kind of, because it was a global phenomenon that it wasn't just the United States, it was everywhere except for maybe Africa. So do you think that there's any credence to that idea that the people in control really that?
And after all of the hell, the Gates Foundation and the Clintons and all these Edomites went over there and did in Africa over the years. Yeah, they knew not to trust that madness. A lot of those leaders, but a lot of them were killed for saying, "Nah, we ain't allowing this." And look at the people who took it through. Especially those of you who got the booster and the this and that. And this is not medical information, but let's be honest about what we're witnessing in the world here.
A handful of billionaires that run the world really did want a depopulation agenda?
If that were their plan, I'd be very impressed. I don't think they're that smart, and I don't think they're that strategic. I think that COVID happened because the baby boomers are really afraid of germs, and that's why you have these global lockdowns, because the baby boomers insisted on everyone staying at home. So the nation that best responded to COVID was Sweden, because the epidemiologists in Sweden said that you can't stop a virus. It's impossible. So we're not going to disrupt the economy. We're not going to disrupt schooling, but we will protect our vulnerable people, which includes people with diseases, which includes the elderly population.
Which is basically the Barrington Declaration.
Basically. And it worked very well for Sweden. Their economy was not as impacted as the rest of the world. But having gone away with COVID, with the COVID lockdowns, we can expect that the elite will use the strategy again if a crisis were to emerge, right? So they're not strategic, but they're opportunistic. They don't think ahead, but they see the benefits of certain strategies. So if this war were to continue, we can imagine lockdowns because of the energy crisis.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. So that's why they'll be able to. People have already talked about it, that there's going to be energy lockdowns and that they're going to have surveillance and they're going to let you know how much energy you're allowed to use. And once you exceed that, they're going to cut you off. They're going to stop your car. They're going to stop all that kind. And do you see that happening?
Yes, it's all part of the plan, right? The 10-day calls for a technocracy. What is technocracy?
Technocracy. See that? And before he came on the scene, you know who was warning y'all about that.
They're going to stop your car. They're going to stop all that kind. And do you see that happening?
Yes, it's all part of the plan, right? The 10-day calls for a technocracy. What is technocracy? Government ruled by AI. That's why America's building all these data centers, even though they cost a lot of money. They don't really actually turn any profit, right? So if you're a company like OpenAI, like the more subscribers you have, the more money you lose because it actually costs you more money to have subscribers than you can generate profit for them. But you have Operation Stargate in place, $500 billion to build data centers all across America. So why would they do that? And the answer is the technocracy. The answer is you eventually, if you're moving towards an empire, you need to create an AI surveillance state, digital currency, digital ID. And it helps you do a national draft. It helps you control the people. It helps you ration energy and food.
And so how do you see a way to turn this around, or is this already this is in the cards because history dictates and they've. Is there? I mean, could there be a charismatic leader who turns this around for the United? But they would just kill him, right?
True.
Yeah. So I don't think this plan will work out because the empire is in decline. They're desperate, right? So they want a national draft. They want a AI control grid. This is all part of their plan. But the people in charge aren't that bright and they're not that effective. And I think this is all going to blow up in their face because I think the American people are much more resilient, much more creative than they believe. It's worked out in China. If you come to China, I'll show you around. We have AI surveillance. We have AI digital currency and digital ID. And it's worked out well in China. But the Chinese people are a different breed. The American people love freedom. They love liberty. And I think that the Americans rather fight than surrender their liberty.
So basically, one of the last things standing in the way of the NWO outside of the scriptures is the U.S. Constitution and so-called freedoms. How are they going to get rid of that? Okay, how are they going to bring about a system of surveillance and lockdowns and the technocracy in a place that is so used to civil liberties, bloodshed? Okay, but again, it's not going to work. All right. So
liberty.
And so now I'm hearing you say another, so there is a chance that the American people, because we do value our freedom, although you couldn't tell, half the country certainly didn't during COVID. They were willing to accept every single restriction on their freedom, and including fascist Nazi-like impositions of forcing people to take experimental medical treatments. So you think that the answer,
and he took it. Jimmy took it, and he's mad.
To this lies in the mass of people coming together.
So yeah, the COVID lockdowns were bad in America, but they're nowhere near as bad as that in China or Canada, right? In Canada, there were the trucker protests. And these were just people who wanted a meeting with Justin Trudeau because they had questions about the vaccine mandate. And instead, they were debanked. If you actually gave $1 to the truckers, you also debanked. So Canada is far more authoritarian than the United States. In the United States, if you didn't like the vaccine mandate, you moved somewhere else. You moved to a red state that didn't have these vaccine mandates. You couldn't do.
Anyway, so you could watch this video and the other videos I put. I mean, again, the economic consequences of what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, the constant turning on and turning off, it's open, it's closed, the ceasefires, war again, bombing, they're just stalling out economies, hoarding up power into themselves, manipulating the markets, anteing up on missiles. But when it's all said and done, all right, the Heavenly Father, through Yahweh Shah and the holy angels, is going to, push more and more nations to get involved in the war. All right. As it says in, I believe, 2nd Esdras 15. In 20, God says, I am calling together all the kings of the earth to come from north, south, east, west. All right. To turn back and restore what they have taken. And I will pay them back with the same harsh treatment they have always given my chosen people. I will use my power and there will be no mercy. So a war is coming. All right. Synonymously before that, there will be economic collapse. Okay. As they want a reason to set up the MOTB infrastructure, digital IDs, all right, in the market itself. All right. So may Yahweh Bashim Yahshua cover his elect. All right. It's a lot happening, man. UFO scientists set to expose Project Bloom being found dead. So, hey, we in some interesting times, man. It's a lot happening. You miss one day, you miss a whole hell of a lot. So, Lord willing, you were edified by this lesson. We will be back with more. Shalom.